All right, so we're going to be diving into some pretty fascinating material about the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius.
Yeah.
You sent over articles, encyclopedia entries.
Yeah.
I even saw a YouTube video in there. So you're clearly looking for more than just like the Wikipedia summary on this guy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is a really good mix of sources.
Yeah.
It gives us a lot to dig into.
Okay, so for this deep dive, let's figure out, why Heraclius is more than just a name in a history book.
Okay.
Like,
Right.
why should someone in the 21st century care about this 7th century emperor?
Well, I think, Heraclius, he really lived at like this hinge point in history.
Okay.
He's ruling this, Eastern Roman Empire, we call it Byzantine, right?
Right.
At a time when like the old world is kind of crumbling and something new is being born.
Yeah.
It's a period of like dramatic clashes,
Yeah.
not just between armies, but like cultures and religions.
Okay, that's a good point. So let's try to set the scene.
Okay.
It's 610 AD. The Byzantine Empire is holding on to control of the Mediterranean, but like things are not exactly stable, are they?
Stable.
Yeah.
No, the empire is being squeezed from all sides.
Okay.
You've got the Persians,
Yeah.
led by Khosrow II.
Okay.
They're pushing in from the east. And then you've got the Avars and Slavs
Yeah.
just hammering on those northern borders,
So it's like a constant struggle just to hold the line?
pretty much.
Okay, so that's already a lot to deal with. But then on top of that, we've got some serious internal turmoil too,
Yeah.
right? Our sources talk about this emperor Phocas,
Focus. Yeah.
who just sounds like a real piece of work.
Focus was brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, he seized power by assassinating the previous emperor Maurice,
Okay.
and his reign was all violence paranoia.
Yeah.
It's really no exaggeration to say that, like, the empire was on the verge of collapse when Heraclius came onto the scene.
Okay, so now that's the world we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
How does Heraclius, this guy who isn't even from the royal family,
Right.
how does he end up taking charge?
So his father, Heraclius the Elder,
Okay.
was the governor of North Africa.
Okay.
He was based in Carthage, which is like modern-day Tunisia.
Right.
And they launched this, like, really daring rebellion.
Okay.
They built this fleet.
Yeah.
They sailed all the way to Constantinople.
Wow. Was that even like a common thing back then? Like to just sail an army across the Mediterranean to overthrow an emperor?
Oh, it was a huge gamble.
Yeah. It sounds incredibly risky.
It really was. But Heraclius, both the elder and the younger,
Okay.
they were brilliant strategists.
Yeah.
And clearly charismatic leaders to pull something like that off.
So what happens when they reach Constantinople? I mean, that must have been like this incredibly tense moment.
I mean, so according to the sources, they capture the city.
Okay.
Heraclius executes Phocas.
Wow.
And then on that same day, he's crowned emperor.
Okay.
And he marries his fiancée, Fabia Eudoxia,
Okay.
who had been held hostage by Phocas.
Whoa. Talk about a whirlwind of a day.
Right.
But I'm guessing there wasn't much time for celebrating.
Not really.
Like, he inherits an empire that is in complete crisis mode.
Yeah. He's got external enemies breathing down his neck.
Mm.
You got internal factions all vying for power,
Yeah.
and a treasury that's been like totally drained by Phocas's excesses.
Not exactly a dream job,
Definitely not.
but from what I'm gathering, Heraclius doesn't just like crumble under the pressure,
No.
right? In fact, he makes some pretty impressive moves in those like early years of his reign.
He did.
Yeah.
It's what makes him such a compelling figure.
Yeah,
He could have given up.
right.
He could have fled back to Carthage.
Yeah.
But he digs in his heels.
Okay.
He starts making some really bold decisions.
Okay, like what were some of his first steps to stabilize the situation?
Well, first he had to deal with those Persian armies
right.
that were like running rampant through the empire's eastern provinces.
The sources paint a pretty grim picture of that.
Yeah.
Like they were just steamrolling through territory.
They were Mesopotamia, the Caucasus,
Yeah.
Syria and Palestine. They all fell.
And then, to add insult to injury, they capture Jerusalem in 614
Right.
and take the True Cross,
Yeah.
which was this incredible important relic.
Right.
Okay, so backing up for a second, like, why was the True Cross so significant?
It was huge.
Like, would it be like losing the crown jewels today?
It was way bigger than that.
Okay.
For Christians in the Byzantine Empire, the True Cross,
Okay.
which was believed to be the actual cross
Right.
that Christ was crucified on,
Yeah.
it was like the most sacred relic.
Okay.
It was a physical connection to their faith.
Yeah.
And losing it to the Persians
Yeah.
would have been seen as like a sign of God's abandonment.
So it was a religious blow, but also like a major psychological blow to the people.
Right. It created this sense of despair.
Yeah.
Like this feeling that maybe God had just like turned his back on the empire.
So it's in this atmosphere, right, with the empire seemingly on the brink, that Heraclius makes this decision that really shows his character. Yeah.
What was it? Don't keep me in suspense.
He doubles down.
Okay.
He could have easily fled Constantinople.
Right.
But instead he rallies the people, starts rebuilding the army, and even embraces this image of a holy warrior.
Okay.
Like going so far as to carry an Acropoietos into battle.
Okay, now I need that one explained.
Yes.
What's an Acropoietos? Is that like some ancient super weapon?
Not quite.
Okay.
It was an icon of Christ.
Okay.
Believed to have been like created miraculously, not by human hands.
Yeah.
And by carrying this image into battle, Heraclius is basically saying, God is on our side, we will fight and we will win.
So it's this brilliant mix of military strategy and religious symbolism.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's appealing to both like the practical needs of his people and their deepest spiritual beliefs.
Exactly. He's showing them that he's not just a military leader, but also a spiritual leader.
Yeah.
Someone who like understands their fears and their anxiety.
Yeah. And is willing to fight for them on all fronts.
From what our sources are saying, it seems like this approach really resonated with the people.
It did.
Like it was almost as if they were waiting for someone like Heraclius to emerge and lead them out of this darkness.
He becomes this symbol of hope, of defiance against these seemingly overwhelming odds.
Yeah.
He's the underdog emperor who refuses to give up.
Yeah.
And that spirit, I think, was infectious.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And, you know, his actions speak even louder than words.
Okay.
He launches this, like, incredibly audacious series of campaigns against the Persians.
Yeah.
And it's not just brute force.
Right.
He uses some, like, truly innovative tactics.
Yeah. The sources describe these surprise attacks, like outmaneuvering the Persians, even forging an alliance with the Khazars.
Right.
Who were these nomadic people from the Eurasian steppe?
Yeah.
Wasn't that like an unexpected move?
It was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
Heraclius understood that he couldn't beat the Persians at their own game.
Right.
They had this massive, well-equipped army.
Yeah.
So he had to find a way to, like, disrupt their supply lines.
Okay.
Exploit their weaknesses.
Yeah.
And, like, use the landscape to his advantage.
So it was a real David and Goliath situation.
Oh, boy.
With Heraclius playing the part of, like, the clever underdog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it all culminates in this decisive victory at the Battle of Nineveh in 627.
Okay.
Heraclius completely routs the Persian army.
Wow.
Khosrow II is overthrown and killed.
Okay.
And his successor is basically begging for peace.
And then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for, right?
Yeah.
The return of the true cross.
Yes. In 628, Heraclius brings the true cross back to Jerusalem.
Okay.
In this, like, grand procession.
Yeah.
And it's hard to overstate the significance of this event.
Right.
It's not just a military victory.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual triumph.
Yeah.
It's a sign that, like, God's favor has been restored to the empire.
I can only imagine what that must have felt like for the people who had lived through, like, years of war and uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's like this weight has been lifted. A reason to believe that maybe the worst is over.
It's this powerful moment of, like, unity and hope.
Yeah.
But, you know, history has a way of throwing curveballs.
That's an understatement. Yeah. Because just as Heraclius is celebrating this hard-won victory, a new force is emerging in the Middle East. Yeah. Islam.
Remember all that chaos caused by the Byzantine-Persian wars?
Right.
It left this power vacuum in Arabia.
Okay.
And into that vacuum steps the Prophet Muhammad.
Okay.
Uniting the Arab tribes under this banner of Islam.
So in a way, Heraclius' own victory against Persia inadvertently paves the way for this new challenge.
Right.
Talk about irony.
It's one of those historical twists.
Yeah.
That makes you wonder, like, what might have happened if things had gone differently.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the interconnectedness of events. Like how one domino falling can set off this whole chain reaction.
And for Heraclius, this new challenge comes at like a really bad time.
Yeah.
He's exhausted from years of fighting.
Right.
His health is declining. And now he's facing this incredibly motivated and rapidly expanding Islamic empire.
And the Byzantines, to be fair,
Yeah.
they initially underestimate the Arabs.
Oh.
They've been fighting Persians for decades. They're not prepared for this, like, new style of warfare.
Yeah.
This, like, religious zeal that's driving the Arab armies.
Yeah, the sources talk about this major defeat at the Battle of Yarmouk in 636.
Yeah.
It was a turning point, wasn't it?
Wow.
It basically opened the door for the Arab conquest of Syria.
It was a crushing defeat.
Yeah.
And it signaled this, like, shift in the balance of power
Okay.
from that point on.
Yeah.
It's the Arabs who are on the offensive.
Right.
And the Byzantines are struggling to hold on to their territories.
And one by one, those territories fall.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking about Jerusalem again in 638, then Mesopotamia, Armenia,
Right.
and eventually even Egypt,
Yeah.
which was this crucial source of grain for the Byzantine Empire.
Devastating loss.
Yeah.
Strategically and economically.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the Mediterranean,
Right.
which had been a Roman lake for centuries.
Yeah.
It's now divided.
It's a new era.
It is.
And Heraclius, despite his earlier triumphs,
Yes.
is now presiding over a shrinking empire.
But his story doesn't end there.
Okay.
Remember, we're
Yeah.
talking about a man who was not just a warrior,
Yeah.
but also a reformer.
Okay.
He recognized that the empire needed to adapt to survive.
Okay.
And he took some pretty bold steps to make that happen.
Right. Our sources mention some major reforms,
Yeah.
like making Greek the official language instead of Latin.
Yeah,
Wasn't that like a radical move?
it was.
Yeah.
And it tells us a lot about how Heraclius saw the future of the empire. It was a recognition that the Byzantine Empire
Yeah.
was no longer simply an extension of the Roman Empire.
Okay.
It was developing its own distinct identity,
Right.
one that was rooted in Greek language and culture.
So he wasn't just reacting to external threats.
Right.
He was actively shaping the identity of the empire.
Yeah,
Was this also part of his motivation for the religious reforms he attempted?
absolutely.
Like he was trying to heal this deep division within the Christian church, wasn't he?
Yeah, he recognized that a divided church weakened the empire,
Right.
especially in the face of external threats.
Yeah.
And his attempt to bridge the divide
Okay.
between traditional Christians and monophysites
Right.
is a fascinating,
Yeah.
albeit ultimately unsuccessful,
Yeah.
chapter in his reign.
Okay, can we pause for a second
Yeah.
and make sure everyone's on the same page here?
Okay.
What exactly is monophysitism,
Okay.
and why was it such a big deal?
So it boils down to the nature of Christ,
Okay.
the traditional Christian view, affirmed by the Council of Chalcedon in 451,
Okay.
is that Christ has two natures,
Okay.
fully divine and fully human.
Right.
The monophysites, however,
Yeah.
believe that Christ had only one nature,
Okay.
which was divine.
Okay, so a nuanced theological point,
Yeah.
but with huge implications for the unity of the Christian church.
Huge.
So Heraclius is trying to find a middle ground,
Right.
a way to bring these two factions together.
Exactly.
How does he go about doing that?
He proposes this doctrine called monothelitism,
Okay.
which basically says that Christ has two natures,
Okay.
but only one will,
Oh,
a
okay.
divine will.
So it was a compromise, an
Yeah.
attempt to find common ground.
Exactly.
Did it work?
Not quite.
Okay.
Both sides saw it as a betrayal.
Okay.
Traditional Christians felt he was conceding too much to heresy,
Yeah.
while monophysites felt their core beliefs weren't fully addressed.
So ultimately it backfired.
It did.
It sounds like a classic example of trying to please everyone and ending up pleasing no one.
Yeah, but it also shows his commitment to, like, trying to find a solution.
Yeah.
He's not just ignoring this problem.
Right.
He's actively trying to fix it.
It's a testament to his character, I think. He's not just a warrior, he's a
Yes.
man of faith
Yeah.
who genuinely cares about the spiritual well-being of his people.
Yeah, but it also highlights the limitations of power.
Right.
Even for an emperor.
Okay.
Sometimes even the best intentions
Right.
aren't enough to bridge deeply entrenched divides.
And speaking of limitations of power, Heraclius's later years are marked by some pretty significant setbacks.
They are.
After those early victories,
Yeah.
the tide seems to turn against him.
It does. And I think this is where we really see the weight of history
Yeah.
bearing down on him.
Yeah.
He's achieved these remarkable victories,
Right.
but he's also made some controversial decisions.
Right.
And ultimately, he's unable to stop the forces
Yeah.
that are reshaping the world around him.
Okay, before we go into like the decline of his reign,
Sure.
there's one more big reform we need to talk about.
Okay.
Our sources mention this thing called the thematic system,
Yeah.
which sounds pretty important,
Yeah.
but I'll admit I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
The thematic system was a major administrative and military reform
Okay.
that Heraclius implemented.
Right.
And it would have like a lasting impact on the Byzantine Empire.
Okay.
So imagine dividing the empire into these military districts called themes,
Okay.
each governed by a strategos,
Okay.
who had both civil and military authority.
So it's like decentralizing power,
Yeah.
giving more control to regional leaders.
Exactly.
What was the thinking behind that?
After facing threats on multiple fronts,
Yeah.
Heraclius likely realized that the empire needed a more flexible
Right.
and responsive defense system
Okay.
instead of relying on a centralized army
Yeah.
that we might be slow to react.
Right.
He empowers these regional commanders
Okay.
to make decisions
Yeah.
and mobilize troops more efficiently.
It's fascinating how he's responding to these like immediate threats,
Yeah.
but also putting in place structures
Right.
that would shape the Byzantine military for centuries to come.
Right.
It shows a real long-term vision, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a testament to his understanding of both military strategy
Okay.
and administrative efficiency.
Right.
He knew that to survive,
Yeah.
the empire needed to adapt,
Yeah.
and the thematic system was a key part of that adaptation.
So we've got this emperor who's a warrior,
Yeah.
a reformer,
Right.
a devout Christian,
Yeah.
and now like a brilliant administrator.
Yeah.
He's like a Byzantine Renaissance man.
He kind of is.
But even with all these achievements,
Right.
he couldn't escape the shadow of those later defeats, could he?
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
And those defeats,
Yeah.
along with some of his more controversial decisions,
Right.
like his marriage to his niece, Martina,
Okay, hold on. Marrying your niece?
Yeah.
Wasn't that like a big no-no even back then?
it was definitely frowned upon,
Yeah.
even considered incestuous by many.
Right.
It created a scandal,
Okay.
alienated some powerful factions within the church,
Yeah.
and further complicated his efforts to unify the empire.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful figures are human, capable of making choices that can have unintended consequences.
Exactly.
And in Heraclius' case, those later years
Yeah.
are marked by this sense of struggle, of trying to hold on to the gains he'd made
Yeah.
while facing new and perhaps even more formidable challenges.
Right.
It's like he's this bridge between two eras,
Yeah.
the ancient world and the medieval world.
Uh-huh.
He embodies the glories of the past,
Yeah.
but also foreshadows the upheavals that are to come.
And that's a really insightful way to frame his legacy.
Yeah.
He stands at this crossroads,
Right.
and his reign,
Yeah.
with all its triumphs and tragedies,
Yeah.
reflects the transition from one world to another.
But before we get too deep into his legacy,
Sure.
we need to talk about those final years.
Okay.
Those losses to the Arabs
Right.
and how those events ultimately shaped the perception of his reign.
Yes, because those defeats,
Yeah.
despite his earlier victories and reforms,
Right.
have cast a long shadow over his legacy, haven't they?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to explore how different sources portray those final years.
Okay.
Do they paint him as like a defeated hero,
Yeah.
a tragic figure,
Yeah.
or something else entirely?
That's where the real historical detective work comes in.
Okay.
And that's what we'll dive into next.
Okay, so we left off with Heraclius facing those mounting losses against the Arabs,
Right.
and it's a stark contrast to those early victories against the Persians.
Yeah.
I'm curious to like dig into how these later events shaped his image,
Okay.
both during his lifetime
Yeah.
and in the centuries that followed.
It's interesting to see how differently Heraclius is portrayed,
Okay.
depending on like who's telling the story and when.
Okay.
In the West,
Yeah.
especially among the Franks,
Okay.
he was often hailed as a hero,
Okay.
the first crusader
Oh, wow.
who saved Christendom from the Persians.
So they focused on those early victories,
Right?
the return of the true cross,
Uh-huh.
that image of him as this divinely guided warrior.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
fit this narrative
Okay.
of the Christian emperor fighting against a powerful enemy,
Right.
and that resonated deeply with Western audiences.
But in the Byzantine world itself,
Yeah.
the picture is a bit more complicated.
It is.
The Byzantine historians wouldn't have been able to ignore those losses to the Arabs.
No, they couldn't.
Those were major blows to the empire.
Yeah,
Hard to sweep under the rug.
exactly. Later, Byzantine historians were much more critical of Heraclius.
Oh,
They acknowledged his military talents
right.
and early successes,
Yeah.
but they couldn't overlook the loss of Egypt,
Right.
Syria,
Yeah.
and Palestine.
It was a lot of territory.
It was.
For them, those defeats really tarnished his legacy.
Yeah, they did.
It's interesting how perspective shapes our understanding of history.
It really does.
The West sees the savior of Christendom,
Right.
while the Byzantines see the emperor who couldn't hold back the tide.
And then you have those controversial decisions too.
Right.
Like his marriage to his niece Martina
Right.
and his attempt to impose monothelitism,
Yeah.
which was seen as like a theological compromise by many.
Right.
Those actions really alienated some segments of Byzantine society
Okay.
and further complicated his image.
So was he a hero or a failure?
I think reducing him to either label misses the point.
Okay.
Heraclius was this complex figure
Right.
who achieved great things,
Yeah.
but also made mistakes.
Right, like everybody.
He was a product of his time,
Yeah.
shaped by the forces swirling around him.
Sounds like it.
It's more helpful to see him as this like pivotal figure
Okay.
who navigated a period of immense change,
Yeah.
both within the Byzantine Empire
Yeah.
and the wider world.
And maybe that's the most valuable lesson we can take away from his story.
What's that?
History isn't about neat categories
Right.
or simple judgments.
Exactly.
It's about grappling with complexity,
Wow.
understanding the nuances,
Yeah,
and appreciating the challenges faced by those who came before us.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Heraclius' reign is a reminder that even emperors,
Okay.
even those who achieve remarkable things,
Yeah.
are ultimately human.
Right.
They make decisions good and bad,
Right.
and those decisions have consequences
Yeah.
that ripple through history.
And as we've seen, those consequences aren't always predictable.
Yep.
Sometimes victory can inadvertently pave the way for new challenges.
Right.
And even the best intentions can backfire.
That's the fascinating thing about history.
What is it?
It's a constant process of unfolding,
Okay.
of unexpected turns
Yeah.
and unintended consequences.
And it challenges us to think critically,
It does.
to question our assumptions, and to recognize that the past is never truly settled.
Right.
It continues to speak to us,
Yeah.
to shape our understanding of the world even centuries later.
Speaking of the past speaking to us,
Yeah.
our deep dive wouldn't be complete without circling back to that YouTube video you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious to know what kind of connections it draws
Okay.
between the Byzantine Empire and the modern world.
Okay, so what does the video say?
Well, it's interesting
Yeah.
because the video uses Heraclius' reign
Okay.
as a lens through which to view like contemporary challenges.
Okay.
It highlights the Byzantine Empire's struggle against multiple external threats,
Okay.
its internal divisions,
Right.
and the pressures of adapting to a changing world.
I can see how those themes resonate with modern audiences.
Right.
We're living in a time of geopolitical shifts,
Uh-huh.
ideological divides, and
Yes.
rapid technological advancements.
Exactly.
It's natural to look for historical parallels,
Right.
to try to understand the present through the lens of the past.
Exactly. But the video also cautions against drawing like simplistic analogies.
Okay.
The Byzantine Empire, for all its similarities to the modern world,
Yeah.
was still a very different place,
Right.
with its own unique set of values,
Yeah.
institutions, and
Right.
cultural norms.
So it's not about finding one-to-one comparisons,
Right.
but rather about using history as a tool for reflection,
Mm-hmm.
for understanding the recurring patterns and challenges that societies face throughout time.
Exactly, and I think that's a valuable takeaway
Yeah.
from our deep dive into Heraclius.
Okay.
His reign is a reminder that history is full of complexities,
Right.
contradictions,
Yeah.
and unintended consequences.
But by studying those complexities,
Mhm.
by engaging with those contradictions,
Right.
we can gain a deeper understanding of both the past and the present.
Absolutely.
It's been an incredible journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
We started with this stack of sources
Yeah.
about a 7th century emperor, and we've ended up exploring themes
Uh-huh.
that are incredibly relevant to the world we live in today.
It just goes to show that history is never truly past.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's always present,
Right.
shaping our understanding of who we are and where we're going.
Right.
And figures like Heraclius,
Yeah.
with their triumphs and tragedies,
Yeah.
their complexities and contradictions,
Uh-huh.
continue to fascinate and challenge us centuries later.
And that's what makes studying history so rewarding.
What is it?
It's a never-ending process of discovery,
Right.
of uncovering new layers of meaning
Yeah.
and making connections that we might never have anticipated.
So to our listener,
Yeah.
I encourage you to keep exploring,
Yeah.
to keep asking questions,
Just keep diving deep.
and to keep diving deep into the fascinating world of the past.
That's right.
Who knows what other insights and connections you might uncover.
Beautifully said. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
We have.
but there's always more to learn,
Right.
more to ponder.
Exactly.
And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of your exploration of Heraclius
Hopefully.
and the incredible world he inhabited.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us on this historical adventure.